Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Bellingham City Council meeting for March 27th. I'd like to make some two announcements. The annual Lake Whatcom Joint Councils and Commissions meeting, that's where the City Council, the County Council, and the Lake Whatcom Sewer District meet together to discuss Lake Whatcom. That will take place this Wednesday, March 29th, from 6:30 to 8:30 here in the City Council chambers. On Monday, April 24th at 7 p.m., also here in Council Chambers, there will be a public hearing on consideration of proposed minor land use code amendments. These amendments will cover such things as fences, signage, and our administrative review procedures. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
April Barker.
Here.
Dan Hamill.
Here.
Jean Knutson. Here. Michael Lillequist.
Here.
Roxanne Murphy.
Here.
Pinky Vargas. Is Pinky excused?
I believe Pinky is just running a little bit late.
Okay. Terry Borneman.
Councilmember Vargas is here. We have a full membership in attendance and a quorum. We will now begin our 15-minute public comment period. It's a full list tonight. We have over 2 pages of people signed up. The first name on the list is Brian Pemberton, followed by Carrie Kovaleski. Would Brian please come forward, and then Carrie get ready to come forward, and after that, Connie Shannon.
Council people, Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to speak before you. I wish to address the homeless situation. I own Northwest Explorations on the waterfront. We employ 30 full-time people. Our people have a living wage. We pay them health benefits, paid time off, matching 401k. But that's not unique to my company. Almost every company in the waterfront has compensation packages similar to that. If you go on to any of our websites, you'll find we're hiring people. If a boat came in today asking for service, we couldn't get to it till the 1st of June. The manufacturing of new buildings and new manufacturing of the waterfront is at an all-time high. It is an economic success that has a lot of momentum right now in Bellingham. Thank you, Mayor, for creating such a great environment and helping support the environment. By the way, the Mayor spoke at the last commission meeting and represented the city quite well and very thoughtful and professionally. It's not always easy to do the right thing, and thank you for your participation in that meeting. I'm here to commend the city's efforts in reaching out to the homeless. They are our brothers, our sisters. The vast majority of them are from Whatcom County, and to spend a night out in the winters we just had would not be responsible for all of that, us to let that happen. But I'm asking that that not happen by condemning the growth and the wonderful employment opportunities that the working waterfront is providing Bellingham. Every business needs the scarce resources to survive. On the waterfront, our scarce resource is access to boat yards, access to the water. To begin denying that is to begin denying working wages and working opportunities for our citizens. A few years ago, the city and the port weren't talking to each other. And when we elected a new mayor, and we got a new executive director at the port, and they did something that's, well, it's just not done very often in today's political environment. They talked to each other. They went off, and they went on top of the mountain, and a few days later they walked back down with the tablets, and lo and behold, there was the great property swap. It was good for the city of Bellingham. It was good for the port, but most important, it was good for our residents here. I would encourage, thank you, I would encourage the council not to condemn the working waterfront by removing some of our scarce resources, but to encourage the city to continue to have another seance. This is doable. This is workable. We don't need to be divisive. There can be success, win-win. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And I forgot to mention, when the bell goes off, that means you have 30 seconds left to finish your remarks, okay? Next is Carrie Kovaleski, followed by Connie Shannon, and then Jean Shannon.
Last time I told you about Sandra Duran in L.A., and now it's happened here in our state. Near Quincy, Washington, 31-year-old Jill Marie Sundberg, a mother of 4 young children, was recently shot to death by an illegal alien criminal, along with 4 other illegal aliens who are also being held. As I stated last time, Governor Inslee has ordered Washington troopers not to cooperate with ICE in regards to detainers. All the people involved were in attendance at a party in an RV park. At some point, there was a verbal altercation between Sundberg and one of the illegal aliens where he felt he was disrespected. So he ordered the rest of them to put her in an SUV, and they took her to an isolated place. They kicked her to her knees and pulled a .40 caliber gun to the back of her head. He shot her in the head and continued to shoot her body 13 more times. Gustavo Rodriguez is charged with first-degree murder. Rodriguez had been deported by ICE previously and had a violent criminal record, including a felony. Rodriguez was going to be deported again for the felony, but before ICE could get to him, local authorities gave him bail for $8,000. The kicker is, when he didn't show up to court for his felony, no order was given for his arrest. This would not have been the case if it was any one of us. Inslee sends a message again that illegal alien criminals have it much easier in our state. 10 days ago in Rockville, Maryland, a 14-year-old girl was violently raped in the high school bathroom by 17-year-old Jose Montano and 18-year-old Henry Sanchez, who are illegal aliens. Sanchez from Guatemala was under deportation order before this heinous crime due to a prior crime. Maryland authorities put grown men as freshmen, which allowed them to share the same grade as this much younger victim. Furthermore, Sanchez was caught at the border and released under Obama's catch and release program. In Long Island, New York, Tommy Vladim Alvarado Ventura from El Salvador had been deported 4 times, each time being arrested for a crime. On Thursday, he was arrested for sexually assaulting and beating a 2-year-old, as well as stabbing 2 women. On the DEA wanted list for drug fugitives, 83% are foreign-born. Specifically, Seattle, New York, Dallas, Philadelphia, and New Jersey have no American-born fugitive on this list, not one. The system is out of control. How many more of our kids have to live without a mother or be raped just so liberal elites can be PC and socially engineer society? The reality is, on the streets, police and victims have to live with the carnage of these policies. We don't know who is here, we don't know where they are, and we don't know who they are. We need to protect our communities and children rather than opening the doors and not asking questions. A strong country enforces its laws and protects its citizens. In 1944, 18-year-olds stormed the beach of Normandy into almost certain death. In 2016, 18-year-olds feel unsafe because words hurt their feelings. And lastly, I hope to talk about homelessness next time. I hope the news stays quiet.
Next will be Connie Shannon, followed by Jean Shannon, and then Greg Winter.
Thank you, Mayor Kelly, City Council, able City of Bellingham staff. I'm here tonight to support the resolution changing Mackenzie to one-way between 9th and 8th Streets in Fairhaven. I'm a business owner, property owner in Fairhaven, and it looks to me like this just makes sense in the flow of what's happening there in that little kind of landlocked spot. To be a one-way, and I understand from the drawings that I'm seeing that it looks like it would actually provide some more parking, which, as everybody knows, is really a near-dear thing in Fairhaven. So if it's 4 or 5 spots, those are those are really important spots. Maybe not in other parts of the city, but they are in Fairhaven. And really, as of today, Ken Imus, rest in peace, has really, they volunteered their space to Fairhaven, and those days are probably near ending. So those 5 or 4 spaces, or however many that is, has some huge value, to Fairhaven. And that's my opinion for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean Shannon, followed by Greg Winter, then Brian Estes.
Madam Mayor, Mr. President and council members, thanks for a few minutes to say my piece on the Mackenzie and A Street. As Connie mentioned, you'll probably get the same story twice here, but we own properties, several properties in Fairhaven. And we strongly support the concept of converting that chunk of Mackenzie to a one-way. It's, as Connie mentioned, it's very tight and compact, and I can just, what I see every day where we're located, people backing up is an extremely hazardous thing. And to make that a one-way, I think is actually elegant, the way it's designed. And if it can unlock the parking spaces, and as we know from the Robertsons with the tennis club, it's their intention, if they can make this work out, that they would, of their own money, put in a half a street and a sidewalk along with it. That's just an extra plus. That's, I think, a very good deal for the city. So it's good at reducing conflict, transportation conflict, and I think it's just a good idea, and I appreciate your support for it if you do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Next up, Greg Winter, followed by Brian Estes, and then Malora Christensen.
Good evening. Thanks, Council and Mayor Kelly. I'm Greg Winter. I'm Executive Director of Opportunity Council, and I just want to make a few observations around the issue of unsheltered homelessness in Bellingham. About 2 to 3 years ago, our Homeless Service Center noticed a sharp uptick in the number of people who were living unsheltered in the city. And at about the same time, Mayor Kelly had convened her Community Solutions Group. It was really kind of focused on downtown issues, but that led to an interagency process with Public Works, Parks, and Police around unsheltered homelessness and the issues of some of the many conflicts that result from people living unsheltered in the community around environmental issues, around parks and trail user conflicts, downtown business challenges. And in that process of having our, at that time, new homeless outreach team working collaboratively with these departments, especially the police department, one thing that became, painfully clear is that if we wanted people to have an option to get inside, if just for emergency purposes or just for shelter, and at that time, even just in the wintertime, we had no options. There was no place to tell people they could go. We couldn't tell people they could camp anywhere legally. We couldn't tell people to go to a shelter because they're all full. So this issue is, one of the most important issues facing us now, because up until 2 to 3 years ago, we had successfully had some results in our work where we saw sharp decreases in chronic homelessness and veterans homelessness. However, due to the lack of affordable housing all over the state, we're seeing sharp rises in unsheltered homelessness all over the state, and in fact, all over the West Coast. And I'm not encouraged by what I'm hearing from Washington, D.C. as far as any relief or help we can get from the federal government. So the local solutions to this emergency, and it really is an emergency, they're difficult decisions. And I really commend Mayor Kelly for her leadership on this issue. I commend Lighthouse Mission for stepping up and taking this really courageous and in some ways risky action to put a shelter in place that it's really hard to overemphasize just how important it is that we help people, very vulnerable people, get inside. So thank you, Mayor Kelly, and thank you, Council, for all the past support you've given to these issues.
Thank you, Greg. Next up, Brian Estes, followed by Malora Christensen, and then Teresa, I'm going to say Mears.
Hi, I'm Brian Estes from the Cordata neighborhood, and thank you, Mayor and City Council, for allowing some input on Bellingham's homeless situation. One of the primary missions, I would assert indeed the key mission of government at all levels, is public safety. Linking those who are unsheltered and on the street to vital rehabilitation, vocational, or psychological services is a complex challenge which many local governments struggle with around the country, and Bellingham is no different. I support the importance of maintaining a working waterfront in Bellingham with accompanying living wage jobs. However, providing a 24/7 facility for the unsheltered in our community should be a priority as well. No government policy or program is perfect. There are obvious trade-offs with the location of this proposed homeless facility, and reasonable people supporting the homeless in our community may oppose this effort. I support siting the facility on Roeder Avenue for 3 reasons. 1, public safety would improve in this industrial area of Bellingham, as 200 men and women who would otherwise be on the street each night would have a warm bed to sleep in and access to needed services. Merchants in this area now complain about overnight sleeping in doorways and sidewalks, trash, and other factors related to homelessness, factors which would diminish with a 24/7 shelter at this location. Second, it's very important to meet unsheltered people where they are, and having a low-barrier 24/7 emergency shelter for up to 200 homeless women and men per night in close proximity to the existing Lighthouse Mission Ministry facilities makes this a sensible location for this type of facility. Third, really the time to act is now. How long do we have to wait to increase homeless services in Bellingham? The city has been searching for a location for this type of facility for over a year and has not found another suitable location within city limits. The levy passed in November 2012 by Bellingham voters has provided funding for this type of services and facilities, so we should no longer wait to find the perfect location. For these reasons, I urge the council to approve the mayor's proposal for a homeless shelter on Roeder Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mallory Christensen. Teresa Mears is next, followed by Mike Parker.
Hello, I'd like to thank the council and Mayor Kelly for being here tonight and for your leadership in addressing homelessness in the city of Bellingham. My name is Mallory Christensen, and I'm the Associate Director of Housing for Catholic Community Services in Whatcom and Skagit County. I'm here tonight in support of the emergency shelter, the proposed shelter. And a large part of my position at Catholic Community Services is managing Francis Place. As the council knows, Francis Place is Bellingham's newest permanent supportive housing building. The process of building and opening Francis Place took some time. It took over 3 years. And in that process, we were able to provide 42 units of supportive housing to some of our most vulnerable community members in Bellingham. So the community gained these new units. People were able to move out of literal and chronic homelessness into an apartment, into a space where they could start to stabilize. That was through extensive work with the homeless outreach team, often connecting with the Lighthouse Mission, pre-housing case management, variety, finding people in camps, figuring out what hoops we would need to jump through. The reality is that we need more housing, and housing is a basic human right. And every night in this city, we have hundreds of people that are unhoused. If I had my way, we could have more Francis Places, and we need to be working on that. We need to have more supportive housing, but we need to do something right now. We need to do something that will help people stabilize and have their basic needs met, have a space to take a shower, have a space to put their belongings, a place to feel safe, a place to be warm. And, speaking to location, one of the reasons why Francis Place took so long to open and to build was because it was very controversial, and people were very worried about the location. We've been open almost 2 years now, and most people, when I do give a tour at Francis Place, say, I've been driving past this building for the last 2 years, and I had absolutely no idea that this had anything to do with homeless housing. So I urge the council, I urge the mayor and her leadership to continue to deepen your commitment to new housing opportunities and to addressing the current needs of our community members. Thank you.
Thanks, Mallory. Next up, Teresa Mears, followed by Mike Parker, then Galen Herds.
Hi, I'm Teresa Mears, and I'm a member of the Homeless Outreach Team, and I love it. For almost 15 years, I've volunteered doing outreach in this community. For the last almost 2.5 years, I've worked 40 hours a week on the Homeless Outreach Team, reaching out to members of our community who are experiencing homelessness. We've seen progress with buildings like Francis Place, supportive housing, with the new Baker Place, with the upcoming new 22 North, with the new 80 units of affordable senior housing that are going to be going in, that are being built right now. This last winter, with a new director at the Lighthouse Mission, they really stepped up to help out with the lower barrier shelter, because the city couldn't find a property that was suitable or landlords that were willing to create the navigation center that our mayor described as our goal in this city. The present low barrier shelter, well, I don't know what that was, at the Mission cannot accommodate showers or laundry facilities and are limited on space for service providers to meet with clients. There's also no place for people to store their belongings while they look for work or attend to other issues in dealing with their individual situations surrounding their homeless issues. With the push to clean up the camps, there's definitely a more visible need to address this issue, but the need has been there for years. We see more of it because they're carrying their belongings around in a shopping cart. We as a city need to really step up now and support a shelter that will accommodate our neighbors experiencing homelessness in a healthy environment with appropriate facilities to address their needs until we can create a more affordable housing or jobs with living wage. If there were more affordable housing opportunities, we could build them. If we could build them faster, we wouldn't need a bigger shelter. There's lots of building going on, luxury student apartment buildings, but a room in one of those units is more than most of our low-income citizens can afford. We have at least 60 people, and I know because I have this list, I've been calling them, at least 60 people on our housing interest pool who are homeless, that are in their 60s and 70s. Think about that. The recent heading in the paper says, "Help the homeless, but don't put the shelter on the Bellingham waterfront." The city's been looking for a location for more than a year. Nobody wants it in their neighborhood or in their building. These are real people with real struggles, and they deserve a real place to sleep and eat and shower and get help. It's time for us to step up again and make this shelter happen in any neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll next go on to Mike Parker, followed by Galen Hertz. And by the way, we appear to be over with our 15 minutes for public comment. We have at least a full page. Is there any objection to keep going? We'll just keep going over our 15 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you for letting me address you. Good evening, members of the council, Mayor Kelly. And again, I'll echo thanks for the leadership in this particular area. My name is Mike Parker, and I'm the director of the Whatcom Homeless Service Center at the Opportunity Council. I'm also the chair of the Whatcom County Coalition to End Homelessness, and I see some of our members in the audience. My primary work is to connect homeless families to housing. In this work, I believe, too, like Melora told you, that the answer to homelessness is housing. I know from working with families experiencing homelessness that living unsheltered on our city's streets, in tents, and in cars is not only demeaning, it's dangerous. People are exposed to numerous acts of violence and intolerance while unsheltered. This is why I'm here tonight, and I have some stats for you. Our preliminary data from the 2017 Whatcom County annual point-in-time count shows that we have over 299 unsheltered. So these are folks in their cars, they're in your tents, they're living in our city parks, they're in our downtown business doorways. These are the very folks that need an opportunity to get into shelter. The county's homeless coordinated entry list currently has over 60 homeless families waiting for housing services. The OC and its partners together housed over 234 households in just 6 months of last year. And we work tirelessly to add resources to our community every year. But we cannot ignore that it takes too long and that people need a safe place to stay while they're working on getting their housing and putting their lives back together. In short, we need a shelter. We need it now. And we support the city and its partnership with the Lighthouse Mission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, Galen Hertz, followed by Melanie Estes, and then Jen Mason.
Good evening, Council. My name is Galen Hers, and I'm the Western Washington University Associated Students Local Issues Coordinator. I would like to speak in favor of a low-barrier shelter for people experiencing homelessness in our community. I strongly believe that housing is a human right. I also recognize the balance at play with this issue and how complex it is. How do we provide services for people experiencing homelessness without impacting businesses negatively, such as our maritime trades that provide valuable living wage jobs? From what I know, the mayor and the city staff have been very diligent in searching for possible locations and found the Roeder property is the only one that meets the criteria. I also read in the Bellingham Herald article that there was a call out for ideas if people had them, so I wanted to throw one out there. I live at the corner of G Street and West Holly in the old Lottie Roth building. And at the back of our building, there's a large open space. It's currently just a grassy field. And using a mapping website, I estimated the distance. It's 265 feet by 105 feet, which is roughly 27,000 square feet. And Parberry owns the building that I live in, and I'm guessing they own that property there. And I wonder if there could be a land swap or anything. And then the property is very close to the existing Mission Lighthouse facilities. And I also want to recognize the city, and it's probably already been evaluated, and I might be very naive up here, but I just wanted to throw it out there. And I don't think I'd be a good neighbor if there are people living to me without a home, which is where I think wherever this shelter gets built, people should be welcomed and treated as neighbors. And if a new location can't be found, I'm in favor of the shelter being built at the Roeder location. I recognize the urgency in approving a shelter. As the previous speaker said rightly, it's an emergency. Providing shelter and services for our neighbors in need is the right thing to do, and it's necessary. And I wanted to thank Mayor Kelly and the Lighthouse Mission for having leadership on this issue and just working really hard on this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, Melanie Estes, followed by Jen Mason, then Jim Kyle.
Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Melanie Estes. I'm a downtown resident, and I'm the director of NAMI Whatcom, which is the Whatcom County chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. The statements I make tonight are my own personal beliefs and have not been endorsed by NAMI National or NAMI Whatcom. I understand the concerns about the shelter and agree that we need to have a working waterfront for everyone, but I wanted to offer my perspective on this issue in support of the shelter. Through my work at NAMI, I see the relationship between homelessness and mental illness. While the majority of folks who have a mental illness are not homeless, upwards of 25% of the homeless population in the United States lives with some form of severe mental illness. In comparison, only 6% of the total population in the United States lives with a severe mental illness. This is an issue of how we treat some of the most vulnerable members of our population. I spent several years working with chronically homeless individuals with mental and addictive illnesses in Seattle and saw how effective low-barrier shelters were. From my experience, it is just not realistic to have multiple requirements, such as abstinence from drugs and alcohol, to access a shelter. It's important to note that oftentimes people are self-medicating with alcohol and drugs from an untreated mental illness. Low-barrier shelters are extremely effective ways of getting folks off the street and helping them gain access to crucial services and ultimately into more stable housing situations. There have been concerns raised about safety. Some are saying that the creation of the shelter will cause safety concerns for other community members. I would argue that these folks are already living outside in our community in an unstructured and unsupervised manner. The shelter will be a space where its occupants will be much safer and it will be supervised and monitored. It is clear to me that the shelter will increase the safety of our community, not decrease it. Finally, from what I understand, living outside is an extremely traumatic experience. While we are discussing the overall idea and location of the shelter, which has already taken more than a year, it is important to remember that people are living outside and are being exposed to trauma in the bitterly cold winter that we had this past year. I urge you to move quickly in the development and planning of the shelter. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next, Jen Mason, followed by Jim Kyle, and then H. Hill Cummings.
Thanks. Hi, Thank you. Hold on, I'm short. Okay, there we go. I'm Jen Mason, and I live in downtown Bellingham, overlooking our developing waterfront. As a downtown resident, I have the firsthand experience of seeing homelessness and what an issue that is here in this community, and I think it's embarrassing. I think it's embarrassing for this community. I think it's embarrassing for society. My daughter agrees. And I think that that's probably a value that many of us share. Many of us share is that we want to keep people safe, all people safe, that we probably believe that everyone deserves to have a roof over their head. We also probably have shared values around keeping our parks and our trails clean, and our creeks clean, and supporting our marine trade. I will say this is not an ideal project. Because in an ideal world, we would not be needing to build a low barrier shelter. We would have enough housing, but we are at a critical point where we can't wait any longer for ideal. This is what needs to be done now. I spent the afternoon listening to the Committee of the Whole meeting and re-listening to the Port Commission meeting, and I really believe the mayor that this is the option that we have. This is not marine trade versus homelessness. This is, do we have a homeless shelter or do we not? Do we have a low barrier shelter or do we not? And so because of that, I really urge the city to support this project, and I do hope that the port will soon follow. Research shows that the longer a person is homeless, the more health risks, the more health issues they risk, the more risk they're at of experiencing violence while they're homeless, the more risk they're at of death. And that's just not a risk I'm willing to take, and I hope that's not a risk that any of you are willing to take if we are forced to go back to square one and spend years looking for yet another location. One last thing I just wanted to point out is that I know that there are many businesses here who are being represented by a coalition, and I think it's wonderful that we have our waterfront coalition that's here. I want to point out a group that I suspect is not very well represented here, which are the 497 homeless households and the 719 individuals who were counted at the last Bellingham point in time count who are homeless and who are not represented by a coalition and who are not probably very well represented here tonight, but are bonded together by their need to have a roof over their heads. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, Jim Kyle, followed by H.L. Cummings, and then Joshua Bessaker.
Thank you, council members and mayor. That's a hard act to follow since I'm a founder of the Working Waterfront Coalition and the current vice president. But I would first like to say I'm proud to live in a county and a city that has a heart, and I commend all of you who are working on this problem and trying to help people less fortunate than most of us, including the mayor, council members, and the people working on that committee. I'm with you. The Working Waterfront Coalition of Whatcom County believes in the low shelter concept. Our problem is with the location, as you probably know. And so we request that the city reconsider alternative sites and leave the C Street Roeder Avenue site as part of the active marine trades area. This is not a NIMBY situation. There are alternative sites which I know have been considered and rejected or not prioritized, but some of these sites exist in our neighborhood. They are close to the working waterfront, or part of, you could say, part of the working waterfront. So we believe in the concept, we see the necessity, but this site is critical in specific ways I'll try to explain. Some numbers that reflect on this issue. First of all, number of members of the Working Waterfront Coalition. These are businesses of all sizes located based in Whatcom County, 120, and that's in 2 years of operation. Number of direct maritime jobs in Whatcom County, 3,970. Number of maritime-related jobs in Whatcom County, 6,033. Now, these numbers come to us courtesy of Western's Center for Business and Economic Research. And I have a handout which I'll get to you somehow afterwards that details those numbers. Some specific numbers specific to the site that we're talking about that's been proposed. The number of people that testified at the Port Commission meeting requesting the port not relinquish its purchase to option, the last meeting, 20. The number of maritime businesses that would be displaced by the use of this site, 5. The number of full-time family wage jobs affected, 15. I did a site inventory today. Number of boats on trailers on that 1 acre, 10. Number of boats on blocks, and this is the important number, these boats have to be lifted up by the cranes and transported. They cannot go on road or they cannot go on the urban grid. 18. Those 18 boats are being worked on by craftspeople at the Landings Colony Wharf shipyard. Estimated income from work done on these boats, 50% comes from outside the county.
Sorry, Jim, time's up.
Thank you. One last thing. Matt Harden is current president of the Working Waterfront Coalition. I have his number on here. He's also owner of the largest business that would be affected. He would like to give you tours. He'd like to see what's happening there. I'll pass these out. His number is right here.
You could just maybe hand them to Terry. That'll be fine.
Thank you.
Thank you there, Jim. Next, H.O. Cummings, followed by Joshua Bessaker, and then Quinn Sharp.
Hello, Council and Ms. Mayor. My name is Howard Hill Cummings. I live at 1517 Texas Street, apartment number 24.
Sir, could you...
Apartment number 24 on Texas Street.
Thank
My
you.
name is Howard Hill Cummings. I am a longtime Whatcom County resident. I've been involved with lots of different things around issues of homelessness, and I am just here to represent those of us who have experienced, are experiencing, and have real concerns with these issues, who apparently I'm the only one of us here. So I'm an advocate. I'm a certified peer support counselor. I represent many other entities, but tonight I'm representing myself. And I would first like to say that I support the shelter idea, but I do not support the shelter unless it has a caveat that this is only a temporary thing. We have to deal with housing first. We've got housing first all backwards here in Bellingham. Housing first. The shelter is only a stopgap. And I have, as a client of the Lighthouse Mission, as a client of most of the services in town, I have my regrets and I have my doubts about the Lighthouse Mission Ministries having such a part in this. I hope that they will, now that they're becoming involved with the city, that they will require that their food handlers have food handlers permits. I will hope that they are required that if I, as a certified peer support counselor, apply for a job at the drop-in center, I do not have a little portion at the bottom of the thing that says I have to comply with their religion. But that's my own personal thing, because I think my point I want to make here now is like when we're dealing with these homeless issues, I don't know who you people are talking to or whatever, but we need those who are experiencing these issues, those who are dealing with these issues, we need these people, myself, at the table. And I really thank everyone who's been doing things and asking things. Again, I would like to reinforce I have serious doubts. My own personal opinion, I would rather go to jail than to go to the mission. But I understand what the definition of a mission is. Enough on that. I would also like to say, reiterating, we have housing first backwards. Housing comes first. You don't have to go through a list. You don't have to go through a line. You don't got to comply. You go to housing first. Someone should really read the model. I've been involved with Housing First since at least 2008. It's almost 10 years. We had a 10-year plan. Whatever. We need to go back to Housing First. And we also need to have consumer-run service providers. People like myself, like Citizens Voices Are Born in Skagit County. That's a whole avenue we're missing as far as funding, as far as all the things we could do. And that's an issue. And excuse me, I'm mentally ill and stuff. You know, I have issues, homeless and stuff. You know, and it's really hard for me to stand here. So I hope I can articulate what I'm saying. It's one of the we can't bring my people here because we have a hard time articulating it. Still got a little more time, but.
Actually, sir, we forgot to start the clock. I think your time may be about
Okay.
up.
I know, that's why I know 3 minutes. I've done this before. But anyway, we need to bring those who've experienced this and bring people to the table. And this is only temporary. We need to. We have a regressive tax system, but we need to tax those who are building all these condominiums and whatever. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Cummins. Next up, Joshua Bessaker, followed by Quinn Sharp, and then Eddie Hansen.
Hello, City Council members and President Lillquist and Mayor. My name is Joshua Bessaker. I'm a resident of Bellingham and the general manager at Satori. We're a recreational cannabis shop. We're located at 100 East Maple in the downtown district. I'm here to get a better understanding of the city's laws and plans when it comes to the topic of our transient population. We have shelters that are at maximum capacity and more people in need are calling our city home every day. It's put a strain on systems and communities alike. With my limited resources, I've looked into the issue and I try and break it down into digestible parts, but there's no one solution to the issue. I've broken the population down into 3 groups, and I'm sure I could have broken it down further, but 3 is where I'll start. So, the groups I've identified are homeless, people who have run into a string of bad luck, but who just need some help to get back on their feet. People who have special needs, who are incapable of taking care of themselves due to limited mental or physical capabilities. And then vagrants, people who have given up on society, who are repeat criminals, who are drug abusers. Each group needs something different, so we need to address each group differently. Homeless need shelters as a short-term solution, and they use them. Nightly they're at capacity. I'm curious though, do we have back to work options? Have we explored anything in the service industry with teaching people abilities to wait on people and to do cooking and stuff like that they can take to other jobs and work, build a skill set on? I'm envisioning something in my head of a New Leaf cafe or a New Leaf diner where part of the population, part of the staff, wait staff is of homeless nature, something where we can use them, put them back to work, where we can, utilize this. Let's see. I'm also thinking of things like, FDR's, the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, where we can take individuals who are capable of using tools and get them to clean up the community, put them back to work, make the place look good, And then I was trying to think of ways we could incentivize this, where if we get people that use these services to have better housing or micro homes or something where we can show growth, somewhere we can give hope. Because really that seems what a lot of people are lacking these days is hope. So right at our location, we have a camp of people that are across the street from our store, and I'm rapidly learning that the police, they have no ability to motivate these people, no ability to help them seek the assistance. They can tell them anything they want to, and the police just have to leave them alone. This is feet from where the farmers market takes place, where families come out to enjoy this great gem that the city has to offer. However, if the families don't feel safe, you can guarantee that they'll stop coming out. And with I guess what I'm asking is for you guys to consider passing new legislation where if an individual is unwilling or unable to seek the assistance that's provided by the city, that the police can take them to these facilities. The police can escort them from where they currently are to these facilities and actually put them there. And if that doesn't work, then, hey, I don't know. But at least getting them out of the intersection of commerce. Being in the intersection of commerce doesn't work.
Thank you. Next up, Quinn Sharp, followed by Eddie Hansen, and then Robin Robertson.
Thank you, City Council members, President Lillquist, Mayor Linville. My name is Quinn Sharp. I'm the owner and operator of Satori. A lot of what I'm going to say is kind of mirrors what Joshua just said here. We opened our doors in November of 2016, and we're just excited to have the opportunity, have a seat at the table, so to speak, and be a part of the downtown community. Although we are a young business, we have had several interactions with the homeless. We see a lot of vagrants suffering from mental illness and drug addiction. We deal with them going through our garbage, leaving garbage, and camping out on the sidewalks, and that's kind of the main reason I just wanted to come here, because we've seen it happen literally right on our front doorstep. And working with the Bellingham Police Department, they aren't able to get them to move out of the out of the sidewalk, out of the way. I heard there is a city laying and sitting ordinance that we are not included in that buffer zone, and that would be something I would love to see include our corner on Cornwall and Maple and included in that zone, just so we can hopefully discourage people from camping on our sidewalks. We're close to the public market, the Saturday market Joshua was talking about. We have bigger businesses coming to the area, and I just kind of want to nip this before it gets out of control. And if there's something we can do as a community, as a city, to where they can't be camping out. I actually brought visual aids because I just thought it was important to see
You
what.
can put it on the overhead right now,
Oh, thank you.
right side up.
So this I took this morning. And he's been there since Friday. Actually, earlier than that. I'm sorry. He's been there for about a week now. You can see, a lady there walking with her child in a stroller, having to go around the area on the sidewalk. We've seen, it's kind of a public safety issue, really, when it comes down to it. We've seen people in wheelchairs being pushed down the road and not on the sidewalk. And I feel like there's something more we can do. And I feel like, the Bellingham Police Department, dealing with them, they just feel like they have their hands tied. Here's the two there overnight. They'll stay. And the last one. So you get the idea. I know homelessness is a really complicated, complex problem. I don't have the answers for it, but I feel like getting this, the laying and sitting ordinance, if we can expand that to include our area, that'd be a step in the right direction. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, Eddie Hansen, followed by Robin Robertson and David Ebenol.
Eddie Hansen. I was here earlier today, lifelong resident of Bellingham and Whatcom County. I just wanted to start off by just saying thank you for taking the time and giving us the extra time that we needed to talk about our presentation this morning regarding trying to build housing out of the Mount Baker Highway project. Thank you, Mayor Kelly. I appreciated all your kind words, and for everybody that spent the time there. I'm really looking forward. I know you tabled the topic until June, but I just wanted to honor you and say thank you. It meant the world to me to spend the time that you guys allowed me to have this afternoon. So thank you, and I look forward to talking to you again in June.
Okay, next up, Robin Robertson, followed by David Ebenol, and then Neil Funt.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to speak in favor of the resolution to change Mackenzie to one-way. And I wear three hats, actually, tonight. I was on the Fairhaven Parking Task Force. My background is in environmental science. I'm a tree hugger from Huxley. And I own the business that's directly affected by the change on Mackenzie Avenue, the Bellingham Tennis Club located at 800 Mackenzie Avenue. So first of all, I want to talk about the Parking Task Force hat. The Fairhaven Urban Village Plan requires that we maintain the level of parking that had existed in Fairhaven as a standard. So Goal 3.1 says that we must address traffic, pedestrian safety, and parking challenges. Specifically, it says adopt a zero-sum approach that requires that the existing area parking inventory be maintained. If a new development would reduce the number of spaces available, these spaces must be replaced so the total number of spaces available is not further reduced by the development. There is the one-way proposal that we have maintains the level of parking. The two-way proposal, from what I understand, reduces the level of parking by a minimum of 6 spots. And those 6 spots come at a very high value. If you're to build a parking facility, each parking space costs about $30,000 to build. So we're talking about $200,000 worth of parking in those 6 spots. Are they valuable? Yes. If we lose them, we don't meet our occupancy requirement. So maintaining that parking is vital for our business. Okay, before you may not know this about me. Before my husband had this bright idea to buy the tennis club 17 years ago. My background is environmental science. I graduated from Huxley. I spent a dozen years in waste reduction and recycling planning and working on water conservation issues. I would not want to put forward any sort of proposal that would be detrimental to protecting our environment. It is near and dear to my heart. You can see I get all choked up when I talk about the environment because it's so important to me. So if I thought that our proposal for the supporting the one-way was going to be a detriment to the creek, I wouldn't be here before you. And lastly, the club's standpoint is safety. We want to improve the safety on that street. We have hundreds of people coming and going every day. That's a great thing. We're a thriving business. We want to keep the kids safe. We have kids coming and going, being dropped off on the street, the turnarounds that happen because it's a two-way are a risk to the kids. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin. Next, David Evanall, followed by Neil Funt, and then John Cornelis.
Hi, David Ebanall. That's going to be a hard act to follow. Doug and Robin are neighbors. I am doing the development right across the street, and they're actually terrific neighbors. We've been working for, gosh, two plus years on, my engineer and his engineer, and coming up with the very best plan possible. And it's a great relationship. We've been working real hard, and I totally support the one-way, just like Robin said. And I want to mention, too, about the homeless. I have nothing against the homeless shelter. I'm the only guy that is probably most affected because my property is right across the street from where it's proposed. I have nothing against it, I guess, but, I think it could be in a better location. I mean, and I'm here to say that I have property in Iron Gate, and I'd be happy to lease it to the city for 100 years and build them a shelter. I just think it's a bad location, and I think the best thing for the homeless is providing jobs, and that building is providing jobs, as previous speakers spoke, and the more jobs we can provide, the more better the economy is in Bellingham. I think that helps the homeless the most. But thank you.
Thank you, David. Next, Neil Funt, followed by John Cornelis, and then Doug Robertson.
Good evening, folks. I'll keep it simple, brief. Hans Urschinger is a friend of mine. We attend the same church and believe in a lot of the same things. My wife would be babysitting or giving child care at the Lighthouse Mission tonight if she hadn't received a call. Slow down, Funt. If she hadn't received a call saying she wasn't needed this evening because the mothers aren't going to their class as they normally would. In any case, I certainly understand the situation. I've talked to homeless people. I can remember on one occasion, 2 of them said, I would just like a place where I didn't lose my sleeping bag, because they'd come in to get new sleeping bags from the Lighthouse Mission. It's not safe. And some of them are thieves, out of necessity perhaps. But even in this light, I have to go back to my history and tell you I bought a boat in Seattle one time, a commercial fishing boat called the New Sunrise. It wasn't new. I was just getting back into the industry just like my dad did. And had some work done in Seattle. It was awful. I would drive for miles to get a part. And when I came to Bellingham, suddenly there they were. All these people ready to go to work, and they became friends. So instead of driving all over town, burning gas and getting stressed, I would go up and talk to my friendly guy at wherever, Lummy Fish or wherever, or girl, and they would do for me what could be done. Great hydraulics work, welding, on and on. In any case, we still have a boat, my wife and I, at the harbor. It's no longer a commercial boat. It's an old Marco built in 1956. And we like being in there. We still deal with the same friendly merchants. And I have to take issue with this idea that there is no other suitable location. And I expected to hear it tonight. The old Sash and Door property, there's nothing there. I haven't seen any drawings or proposals, anybody saying, let's use that property or let's do something more important with that property. Is something more important waiting to be done on that property? How many people have spoken about how important this issue is? Is it important enough to save that property and evict these people essentially from their jobs and businesses? I hope not.
Thank you. We're well over our 15 minutes. We have 4 more names, then we'll move on to the rest of our meeting. The first of those names is John Cornelis, followed by Doug Robertson. Did I skip somebody? I got you?
Nope.
Yeah. Right, followed, John Cornelius, followed by Doug Robertson, and then Stuart Plotnick. And Brooke Anderson is the fourth name on the list. Would the council like me to keep the list open for more commenters? I've got to cut off sometime. Council's wish. Arlene will squeeze you in. Go ahead.
I'll be quick. Thank you, Council and Mayor, for all your hard work and everything you're doing. The discussion tonight here has been really tough about the homeless thing. I'd like to talk about the water service at 1323 Mount Baker Highway. You got some folks there that are, ready and willing to build housing out there. They're in the UGA, and I don't know them, and I've never met them, but I know how hard it is to find housing of any type in Bellingham. You can go on Zillow and look for a house. There ain't many out there, and they're expensive, and they go fast. I lived here in the 90s, and I think when I moved here, I paid $60,000 for a little house in Bellingham. Moved out of here in 99, and, missed the rush, because that house today, I saw it a while back, sold for $300,000. So it would have been a really good investment if I'd have hung on to it. So I tried to come back here, and I live right outside of the city limits in a house that I don't have reliable water supply. And, I would like you guys to consider some way that we could, the folks that are in your retail water service area could somehow get hooked onto it. I mean, these folks on the Mount Baker Highway here, they look like they're ready to build, I think, 24 units of housing. And I know that the infill that you guys are trying to create in Bellingham is a great thing, but I don't think it's enough, and it's really, really driving up the cost of housing. And I personally work with a couple people that have been trying to find homes in Bellingham, and they just can't. They're either too expensive or they come and go too quickly, especially in the price range for a small family or a young family. So anyway, thank you again for all your hard work, and I hope that you guys can come up with something. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Doug Robertson, followed by Stuart Plotnick, and then Brooks Anderson.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Thank you very much. My name is Doug Robertson, and I'm following up with Robin in support of the one-way of McKenzie. It's important to note here that the one-way plan that's been presented works. This is not a situation where we can waive parking requirements, we can create roads out of how we think it should be done. This is a time where you have to look at your planning documents, your regulations and your codes and say, did we meet all those requirements? And this plan does. You need to know we started almost 2 years ago when David started his project, and we saw a problem with parking. David and I hired our own engineers, and we've both been spending thousands of dollars in working with the city to develop a plan that works. Here's a row of about half of the proposals we went through. We've looked at one-way, two-way, 45-degree, 60-degree, 75-degree, 40-degree parking angles. We've looked one way. We've looked at everything. And in working with the city, this meets all the code requirements, all the design requirements, all the fire requirements. What's important is when working through the process, Dave and I came up with a number of options and said, how about this? And the city was very good in saying, no, yes, maybe. And that's now you're faced with, I know there's an informal proposal, I guess it's Brooks Anderson's proposal, that I was just able to view a copy of today. That is one of the ones that we brought forward, and Martin Gilstad with the city immediately said, no, you cannot have a new development in a city road that has perpendicular parking. It isn't allowed because you have the problem of two-way backing. If you have a person pull in this way, they will back out that way, or they'll back out that way. That's why you don't see any city road having perpendicular parking. You must have angled parking or parallel parking next to the road. So it's clear that that alternative wouldn't work because you have the perpendicular parking. It's also important to note that you have to have ADA compliant sidewalks. Well, even though it's not to scale, I was able to give this to our engineers, and they looked at it and concluded that this Ms. Anderson's plan doesn't meet ADA requirements for the sidewalk that would be on our side. The other issue is parking is important. And even though I've heard someone say today that what's 4 or 6 spaces, that means I lose my occupancy permit. I'd really like to keep my business open. And I see President Lilliquist shaking his head, but actually there are design requirements that say I need so many parking spaces per square foot. And if I fall below that, then if I want to do anything else, such as rebuild after a problem or make an addition, I have to make up those parking spots. So losing that is consistent with taking away some property. Our engineers looked at Ms. Anderson's plan, and it's incorrect because you need to see this area right here. There has to be a much bigger area around the driveway, so she'd lose 2 more spots there. You can't have the spots here and there, so it's at least 7 to 9 spots would be lost with perpendicular parking, a plan the city would not accept. Please trust your experts. They're the road engineers. Please approve the one-way ordinance. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Doug. Next up, Stuart Plotnick, followed by Brooks Anderson, and our last public comment person will be Arlene Feld.
Good evening. My name is Stuart Plotnick, and I'm a current board member of Fairhaven Neighbors. Thank you for the opportunity to express my 2 cents. I've been looking at this situation on Mackenzie since the neighborhood was first alerted that this potential change would happen, and that was around February 1st. I've really tried to understand the various perspectives of the tennis club, the developer, Ebenol, and the city. But my main perspective is as a resident of the neighborhood who frequents the area by foot and by car. And I, like many others in our community, feel protective of Patton Creek. We are extremely grateful for all the work that's been done so far to clean it up for salmon habitat and for future generations of Whatcom County residents. I'm very familiar with traffic flow in that area and parking issues in Fairhaven. And I think that the challenge for all of us is to imagine the usage and traffic, what that will look like after the Fairhaven Harbor apartment complex is fully built out and new townhomes and businesses are occupied. And also of concern to us in regard of the creek is what happens when the other side of the creek is developed. That too will create an additional and magnifying burden. My main concern is that if Mackenzie is changed to one way, that it will be just too much traffic on 8th Street, which of course is right next to the creek. When in fact, ironically, much of that traffic that we're now forcing to go to 8th Street by virtue of it being one way, they would much prefer to either go out 10th Street where they came in or 9th Street where they came in. And so it's a little confounding and confusing to see why why the proposal came forward as such. There's plenty of room to keep Mackenzie two-way. There's room for sidewalks on both the sides of the street, room for plenty of straight-in parking on both sides, and room for ample two-way lanes on Mackenzie. What I'm hearing is that if we change Mackenzie to one-way, the businesses will get 4 more parking spots. In the bigger scheme of things, it would be much better to have a few less parking spots and keep Mackenzie two-way and allow cars to exit more naturally from either 9th Street or up the hill to the truck route, or from 8th Street for that matter. Let the traffic flow where it naturally would want to go, rather than artificially forcing it all one way. Keeping Mackenzie two-way would also help protect 8th Street and the adjacent creek from the full brunt of traffic. My memory of this property, the history of 8th Street, years ago was that it was going to be vacated in order to protect the creek. The last developer had a proposal for only emergency vehicles. Now we see a proposal to have an artificially large force of cars coming through 8th Street, which really isn't designed to hold it.
Time.
So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Brooks Anderson, and then last of all, but best of all maybe, Arlene Feld.
Good evening. My name is Brooks Anderson. I am known when I come to this body to be rather verbose. Before my time starts, oops, she's already started. I wanted to say I've come from 9 minutes down to 3.5 minutes, so please let me finish what I have to say, please. Okay, so my perspective as president of Fairhaven Neighbors is that it is not in alignment with the written purpose of Fairhaven Neighbors, which is to preserve, protect, and enhance the physical, economic, and social well-being of the Fairhaven neighborhood. Keeping Mackenzie two ways helps us to preserve and protect our neighborhood for everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the proposed resolution before you tonight to change Mackenzie Street to a one-way street. We strongly oppose this resolution and believe a better plan would be to keep Mackenzie two-way, which with straight-in parking and sidewalks on both sides. This is in the community's best interest. Fairhaven neighbors strongly opposes this resolution to make Mackenzie one-way. While it would provide 4, maybe 6 additional parking spots for the privately owned business and new Fairhaven Harbor development, we do not believe it is in the best interest of the neighborhood or the broader community. To be clear, it's not good for traffic flow and it's not good for Patton Creek. I've learned a lot, but I still have unanswered questions in areas of conflicting information. First, what is the hierarchy of documents in governing Bellingham? I'm sure that the comprehensive plan and the shoreline plan oversees the more Bellingham-centric documents, but what is the precedent of the others? The Bellingham Municipal Code, the Fairhaven Neighborhood and Urban Village Plan, the Fairhaven Parking Plan, and the Fairhaven Parking Task Force. Second, I understand that the prerogative of the Directors of Planning and Public Works to apply Exhibit G of the Bellingham Municipal Code, which would allow them to do what's best for Fairhaven. It seems like the perfect situation. Why not use all of the Fairhaven plan instead of focusing on policy 3.1.1, yet ignoring policies 3.2 through policy 3.9 on Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 of natural areas? And third, we all agree, all of us, that the first priority is pedestrian safety. That is why in one of our last letters to council we said Fairhaven neighbors would advocate for the vacation of the 4-foot strip in front of the tennis club so the tennis club could create a sidewalk for the patrons. The sidewalk would connect Mackenzie Street to Harris Avenue. The planning department says the tennis club would need to vacation to build sidewalks. Now the tennis club owners say that they still won't be able to meet ADA regulations for 6-foot wide sidewalks without one-way angled in maximized parking. We've been told by city staff this won't work. So why is it that one private business on Mackenzie insists on single one-way angled parking with 16 spots in front of their business when other Fairhaven businesses only have 1 or 2? In summary, straight-in parking makes much more sense for the larger body than maximized single
We need to move on to the next
angled
person.
parking. Thank you very much for your patience.
Arlene, you're next.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to speak about the shelter, the proposed shelter. To me, there's 2 questions of importance here. One is what's good for the city, and the other is what's good for the homeless population. We've been waiting a long time for these kinds of services to be available, and now they finally may come into being. We have to deal with the resistance, and we understand it just as they understand our needs, but we ask the resistance to make a sacrifice. We have deep needs here. We've had these needs for a very long time. And I think it's going to be good for the city. You've had testimony here tonight of businesses in the city, in the downtown, and they are having difficulties with this population. They don't want to be in those doorways. They need to be somewhere safe and comfortable. And the current housing for temporary housing is not sufficient. People are having to walk around with bags on their back with all of their belongings in them. Imagine spending your whole day walking around with every little thing that you own on your back. Imagine the difficulty of trying to get your clothes cleaned when there is no source for that. Imagine the difficulty of getting a shower when you have to walk to the Y to get a shower. So this facility idea plan is an excellent one. We just have to get the plan through, and I'm asking for your support. And I know that the citizens of the city are in support of this idea. There's very little resistance to that. It's the location that there's any argument about. You could argue it. You could say, well, why not Barclay? Why not Edgemore for a facility? But we don't have that. We have this, and it's a pretty good location, and we need people to give a little. I just spent 10 years working with this population in a crisis triage program. I personally asked people, what do you need? And they all said housing. After that, they said someplace to go in the daytime. This facility will have that, with activities and services and counseling referrals. They need a place to store their possessions that's safe. They get stolen, they get beat up. It's a serious matter for them every day. They're suffering for this group of people. As their counselor, I learned that they need stability
Arlene,
to
time's up.
pursue sobriety and emotional stability. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. That was a full hour, very useful public commentary. We'll now go on with our report of afternoon committee meetings, actually morning committee meeting. The first committee was Public Works, Public Safety. Chair is Terry Borneman.
Yes, we started early today. Thank you, Michael. Our committee had 5 items before us this morning. The first was the review of Life Safety Division's 2016 accomplishments and the 2017 work plan. I'm just going to mention just a couple of these that people can go to the program to see, but just a couple of the accomplishments in 2016. We were able to fill the division chief position in the fire inspector position. They reestablished the elementary school fire safety education program, which I was very excited to hear about. And they partnered with the American Red Cross chapter to install 177 smoke alarms in 65 residents at 3 mobile home parks. A few of the statistics, they had new construction plan reviews, 1,112. New construction field inspections, 1,281. Public education presentation, 75. But the attendees for those were 2,625 that they administered to. The existing building inspections was 147. Their work plan for 2017, I want to mention, they're planning on increasing the existing building inspection in 2017 to 600. That's up from the 147 this past year I just mentioned, and they're going to revamp the fire operations permit and a number of other good things. I will leave it at that. People can go to TV 10 and see the program. This was for information only. The next is an interlocal agreement between the City of Bellingham and the Whatcom County for design of West Horton Road extension. The city and the county's desire to extend West Horton Road from its current terminus westward to Northwest Drive. Phase 1 of this extension is located within the Bellingham city limits with its current terminus to Aldrich Road, and Phase 2 is located within the unincorporated Whatcom County from Aldridge Road to Northwest Drive. The city and the county desire to enter into an interlocal agreement in order to coordinate the design phase of the West Horton Road extension on a basis of mutual advantage. And this is a project that we've been talking about for a very long time. We're finally getting to the point where it's going to happen. Committee recommended approval, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion before us to approve an interlocal agreement between the City of Bellingham and Whatcom County for the design of West Horton Road extension. I should note that the city will be contributing approximately $154,000. We have a state grant for $500,000, and the county will be bringing $1 million to the project.
Yep.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
The next item we had was Holly Street Overlay Night Work Variance. Section 10.24.120 of the Bellingham Municipal Code permits night work to occur in city projects in residentially zoned areas only if council approves a variance based upon its finding that night work is either necessary or in the public interest. The Holly Street Overlay project is underway, and staff recommends that a variance be granted to allow work on the project, including utility connections and mainline paving, to occur at night. This night work will help limit daytime traffic impacts and disruptions in businesses. Utility connection work is expected to occur in the late March and early April, while paving activities will be in early June. The committee recommended approval, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion before us to approve a variance in noise ordinances for night work on Holly Street. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
The next item was a resolution regarding emergency repair of a gas leak at Post Point. City staff discovered a significant leak in a city-owned 4-inch natural gas main that feeds the city's sludge incinerators at Post Point wastewater treatment plant. Staff awarded an emergency contract to Angar Construction to install a replacement main without soliciting competitive bids. Bellingham Municipal Code 4.880.010 authorizes emergency contracts, provided that City Council passes a resolution declaring an emergency exists within 2 weeks after contract awards. A proposed resolution is attached. The committee recommended approval, and I so move.
Second. We have a motion before us to approve a resolution declaring an emergency to fix a leaking gas main. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the resolution signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
Okay. The last item was a resolution changing McKenzie to one-way westbound between 9th and 8th Street in Fairhaven. This is a continued discussion. McKenzie Avenue between 8th and 9th Street is currently two-way with no sidewalks or other street improvements. The existing ROW width is not adequate to support the full suite of standard improvements identified for the Fairhaven commercial core. As development and public improvements are made, a balance of priorities is needed. Staff place priorities on 1, pedestrian amenities and sidewalks, 2, maximize on-street parking, both public and private, and 3, minimize impacts to critical habitats, 4, emergency vehicle access, and 5, minimize conflict points between pedestrians and vehicles. In order to meet these priorities, it is recommended that the street be limited to one-way traffic westbound. Staff recommended adoption of the resolution. Fiscal impact is changing. Street signs will cost $500. Today, the committee, we had a mixed recommendation, because I voted against it, but also stating that I might change my mind tonight because I had to get some more information, and I didn't feel I could just vote to abstain. So since there was a mixed recommendations, I'll turn it over to the chair.
Thank you. Council. Gene.
I'll move approval.
Second.
We have a motion before us. The motion before us is to pass the resolution to change McKenzie Street from its current two-way to a one-way configuration. Any discussion of the motion? Okay, so I'm going to write this down. I'm going to see Dan April, and then Terry. Anybody on this side? Okay, let's go in that order. Dan.
This question for Ted Carlson. Does the new stormwater facility that's located off of 8th provide adequate protections for Patton Creek under this proposal?
Good evening, Ted Carlson, Public Works. Yes, all of the surface water runoff from Mackenzie currently goes into the new stormwater facilities and would continue to do so under the proposal for one-way. We believe that the water quality treatment there is effective and is adequate for the stormwater runoff.
So I'm confused about the sidewalk that's supposed to go in front of the tennis court. I read versions of letters that say it's going to go in, others that say it's going to go in only if it goes to one-way. What's the agreement that the city currently has? And I'm looking at this from a perspective of, for me, it's the pedestrians and the cyclists, that which one of these configurations is going to give them the safest? So can you help me with that sidewalk piece, because that's pretty important.
Yeah, I can help you with some of that. So we believe that the one-way configuration is the safest for pedestrians and all non-motorized. It does have fewer conflicts given the one-way nature. Backing out from the angled parking with all flow of direction in one way, we believe is the safest for vehicles and pedestrians throughout that corridor. Regarding the potential sidewalk on the tennis club side of Mackenzie, there is no requirement for the owners of the tennis club to build the sidewalk. They're doing some renovations to their facility, nothing that triggers full frontage improvements to the extent that they would be required to put in sidewalk. So if the sidewalk does go in, which the city, the property owner, and the developer believe does make the best pedestrian connection through there to have sidewalk on both sides of Mackenzie, obviously including in front of the tennis club, which would provide much safer pedestrian access for folks that are being dropped off or that are going to the tennis club. That is not a requirement that the city is putting on the property owner. That is something that the owners of the tennis club came forward and said they would like to make this improvement. The one-way configuration helps them provide a better alignment for that improvement, but again, it's not a requirement, so whether or not that's built is up to the property owner.
So that's difficult for me. So if we make this a one-way and we go that far, and then what I'm hearing is that they could determine, they decide they don't want to build it, and we've gone through this to do, are you saying that once we make this decision to go there, there will be some kind of a contract, something that this is going to for sure go in, this sidewalk?
No, there's several steps that would have to happen for them to, in terms of any agreement between the property owner, the tennis club owners, and the city would come once the decision was made to put the sidewalk in. They would have to go through the process of vacating some of the right-of-way, which is a separate action, which we scheduled for the hearing examiner. If that moves forward, then the city would work with the property owner to enter into some type of an agreement to allow public access along the sidewalk. So it wouldn't be a private sidewalk; it would be open to the public. But there's no requirement for that to happen. We believe that regardless of whether or not that sidewalk is constructed, the one-way alignment is a better alignment, given the reasons that we have highlighted previously, both the safer configuration, limit some of the conflicts for pedestrians and vehicles. As was stated earlier, it's a better parking alignment that provides a safer access for cars that park and then back out into the traveled way. Maximizes parking, which has been brought up several times, and that is a goal of the Fairhaven Urban Village Plan, and the code and the policies certainly support that. So for those reasons, we believe that the one-way configuration is better regardless. The decision to convert 8th Street to one-way has already been made in association with the stormwater facility. To have two-way lead it a one-way, we believe is problematic. Everyone's in agreement that we don't want to build a turnaround at the end of Mackenzie because we don't want to encroach further into the riparian zone. We don't want to add impervious surface. So given all of those reasons, we believe it makes sense to convert Mackenzie into one-way, which would feed into the already one-way 8th Street.
Terry.
Yeah. This morning I had brought up, and I'll kind of bring it up bring it up again is I've always been a proponent of saving and parking spots where we can, especially because I've argued it for years in the downtown of how we know we need parking and additional parking here, but sometimes we're quick to say in the downtown, oh, we want to put a storm garden in, we'll take out parking, or we want to do this amenity, we'll take out parking. And I've resisted that, and in this one, we're saying we want to do this because we want to save parking. And I'm going to vote for this because now that, I have listened and I've got more information, because I do believe we need those additional parking spots just like we need in downtown, we need to do it here. And I hope if council votes for this, we'll be mindful of it and be consistent when we're talking about these kind of things, of why it is important for business people and for people shopping and for people that want to walk the trails and others to have a place to park. I am satisfied now when I go back and look that we're not going to see that much run through from bypass traffic from 10th down through there. I went back to tonight just to check it, and now they're not going to cut through that parking area. That was a little concern that I had heard, so I wanted to check that, and I don't think that's going to be. I'm satisfied with the environmental parts on this, so overall, I think it's going to be, it's going to be a good project, so I'm going to, I had to really think about it, because there's a lot of issues, there are issues involved that need to be considered, but I will vote for it tonight.
April, I'm going to go ahead and take a turn, and then we'll go to you. So there were a couple statements that were made in comment that I wanted to check on. Is it true that straight-in parking is not allowed and would not work in a two-way configuration? And that was one of the ideas. Is it just simply not allowed, or is it just simply not good practice?
Head-in perpendicular parking is not allowed on arterial streets, two-way arterial streets. There's not a flat-out prohibition on non-arterials, but it is not best practice given some of the reasons we talked about today. You certainly can't do it unless you have adequate width for the backing out movement. Preference is certainly to have angled in. You may see head-in parking, but typically if you do see it, you have parallel parking on the opposite side of the street, something like that, so that you have the room to make the backing movement where you could be going either way. You don't have people backing out at the same time and could go either way, either travel direction. So not a flat out prohibition on non-arterials. It would be more the not good practice, not our policy. Could be approved given certain circumstances, but certainly not allowed on arterials. Mackenzie in this section is not an arterial, so that doesn't apply.
And you said that they're really not required to build the sidewalks. If they redevelop to a certain extent, they would. But if they're not actually redeveloping, they don't need to build sidewalks. They've offered to do so, especially if there's a street vacation, to give them the room to do so. If they did it on that voluntary basis, would it have to meet ADA requirements? Because the assertion was that they can't build to ADA requirements.
If it's going to be, it would have to meet ADA requirements, and if it's going to be public access, certainly has to be ADA accessible.
And then finally, it was stated that if parking was lost in front of the building, they would actually lose their occupancy even though there was no use change in the building.
That I cannot speak to. I may defer to Rick on that.
Could I talk about the head-in parking?
Sure.
No, typically what happens is if the use became more intense and it passed a certain threshold as identified in municipal code, we start counting spaces. In essence, then you have to accommodate all of those. If spaces are eliminated and there was a significant change, there might not be enough in front to accommodate the use. So again, it's a supposition that some subsequent use would be more intensive. Uses that were previously established sort of get grandfathered. They may not meet our current codes, but they may have adequate parking. But you pass a certain threshold, you've got to meet all the rules. And often that is the case.
Okay. You had a question now?
Okay, so again, back to the sidewalk. I'm feeling a little tired since 6 o'clock this morning, so you might be telling me something and I'm not hearing you, so I apologize if I'm not catching what you're saying. My understanding is that this type of parking will allow for more parking spaces. Half of these parking spaces will be private, though. They will be specific to the tennis club. They're not going to be public spaces where people can come and find a parking spot, which I'm okay with in the sense that we're going to get a sidewalk that's going to meet ADA standards and it's going to go in. I don't want to vote for something that's like, yeah, we really want to do that, and then we do all this work and we make this decision, we go against, you know, what other people are suggesting, and then the sidewalk doesn't get built. So I guess what I'm understanding is if we go forward with this, a sidewalk will be built to ADA standards and they get their, I don't want to give up 2 private parking spaces if we're not getting a sidewalk. So are you answering me and I'm just not, okay.
Well, at this particular time, I can't give you an absolute answer on whether or not the sidewalk will be built. But what I can say is that the parking adjacent to the tennis club is on private property now. So the folks that are parking there are already mostly on private property. There may be a little bit of the car that extends into the right-of-way. So we already have a condition where that's private parking on private property.
And then if we go the route of one way, we give them an additional 2 spaces of private.
If the vacation of the right-of-way moves forward, what that does, it allows them to maintain the private parking, but also gives them room to build the sidewalk between the parking and the building.
And
without
we're
the
hoping
vacation,
they're going to build the sidewalk.
That's right.
Build the sidewalk.
Angled parking, the angled parking provides more parking spaces throughout the corridor on both sides, both for the public parking on the north side and the private parking on the south side.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, because I'd asked, you know, one that I'd forgotten as part of the reason I have changed my mind was checking with Robin about that the issue of the sidewalk, and they have stated that if the one-way street goes in, they're building that sidewalk. I've worked with Doug and Robin for a long time on different things, and I believe they're going to do it. If they say they're going to put it in, I think that's one we can count on. They've been pretty solid business owners in the Fairhaven area for quite a while, and things. So they're putting in at their own expense about $100,000 worth of sidewalk on it. Parking spots, if Fairhaven needs to go to a structured facility at some time, you know, we're looking $40,000 a parking spot. The other ones we're looking close to $30,000 for parking spots. So altogether, the city gets a pretty good value on this for the sidewalk being put in and getting a number of different parking spots as well down there, or Fairhaven neighborhood or business district. And so overall, I felt the benefits outweighed the negatives.
I just wanted to show some respect for all the different variations that have been explored throughout the course of this small segment that we're considering. And all of the ways that we have looked at angled parking, non-angled parking, the size of the sidewalk, the size of the street, 2-way, 1-way. I mean, we're not traffic engineers. And I really don't think Public Works is presenting this idea to try to hurt anybody in our community. We're trying to create a safer street. We're trying to create the maximum use of the street with the limited space that we have. And this can all be revisited. If it creates the damage that people are saying, we can go back. I fear that if we go to 2-way, it's just going to cost more. It's going to take a longer time. These improvements won't be made. And so I am going to support the 1-way and then continue to work with the community to see if we need to make changes thereafter.
April?
So I do want to thank everybody. You're correct. It's a very small space, but we're coming into something, and if you watch today's meetings, we're in a time in Bellingham where nothing is going to be easy anymore. It's happened, and you know, you had all those easy years, Gene.
Never has been easy, Maggie. I had a full head of hair 24 years ago, so don't give me that.
No, it's true. I mean, anything that we do, there's just constraints and there's pulls, and we're going through these growing pains, and it's very interesting. As a neighborhood representative, I completely understand when people are bringing things forward with facts, and you have a sense, and you're saying, but it doesn't make sense because you've driven that street, you know that. And so for the neighborhood people that came forward, completely get it. I mean, we did it with Northwest Avenue right in front of Maury's, where y'all came out and said you were going to take out the turn lane, and it made sense to all the traffic engineers, and we just about lost it because we knew it wasn't going to make sense to us. So I really tried to understand the neighborhood perspective on this, because I know many times y'all feel things that traffic engineers can't feel that. Not that they don't have feelings, most of them, but so just kidding. It's been a really long day. So I'm going to put some trust in that we've had a long time business here, and you know, we're trying to help them. They're trying to help us. I'm also, you know, working with Natural Resources. I've really spoken with them a lot, and I feel confident that, I mean, the millions of dollars that we put into Patton Creek, I don't think our staff would be doing anything to harm that in such a small sector that could have a huge impact. So I feel really confident with that. Feel confident with what you talked about. You know, it's a little bit lower, so hopefully the light, the noise isn't going to be as big of an impact, and we'll continue to work on the Patton watershed. Ultimately, for me, it comes down to, especially outside of a facility that's running a lot of different children's programs, it really comes down to safety for pedestrians, and therefore that sidewalk could be such a nice connection to get over. And as people said, we're going to be developing more. So living in a neighborhood that really has no sidewalks, I cherish them, and I think that this would be very important, especially if that parking is going in, because those sidewalks are engineered in a way that they stop people from coming in and hurting the pedestrians. So that's also my concern of it not getting built, is that we put more parking in, and yeah, there's more space, but there's not a lot of protection for the person. So I support the sidewalk, and I really support everybody coming out for this little part of Patton Creek. I think it's really important.
I have a question. Would the two-way configuration prevent sidewalks from being put in front of the tennis club?
It doesn't prohibit it, but there's nothing requiring the sidewalk to go in.
Nothing requiring it now.
Right.
Under either
One thing I would say about that, and I certainly don't want to speak for the owners of the tennis club, but the separate process that's requiring them to go in front of the hearing examiner on the right-of-way vacation, remember that vacating right-of-way, the city needs to be compensated for that vacation. We certainly could work with the property owner, and their capital contribution to the sidewalk could be part of that vacation of the right-of-way. So there's opportunities for the city to work with the property owner to move towards that sidewalk being built, and that can be done through the vacation process as well. I think that speaks more to April's concerns. Whether or not it can happen with a two-way configuration, you can put sidewalk in there with a two-way configuration. We haven't looked at all the details of that, but the width would suggest you probably can. You have to likely narrow the sidewalk on the north side a little bit more. We're already under the one-way configuration, reducing the width of the sidewalk from the requirements in the Fairhaven Urban Village Plan, which say 15 feet. We're going to reduce that a little bit to accommodate parking on both sides and still maintain the width that's needed for the fire apparatus in between the parked cars. So there's, again, it's a lot of stuff trying to fit into the limited space.
What I guess I heard this afternoon and then privately in the hallway conversations is that staff feels they could make the two-way configuration work. And I'm hearing that even with a two-way configuration, you could get in sidewalks. Things might be tighter. But what I'm hearing, people are deciding, oh, if we can't do this, we can't do this. I'm thinking staff can make it work under two-way and one-way. It's not such a split. But it maybe is harder under the two-way configuration. I'm also feeling in this decision shades of two other items we're going to be dealing with tonight. One, the theme is that history of the in the past makes the presence difficult. We have a water and sewer service request that the council felt they had no way of granting because there were previous decisions that committed us to a flawed situation. I think this area of Fairhaven is similarly troubled with previous decisions and narrowings of the rights of way, and the fact that 8th Street was just simply platted way too close to the creek before that mattered, and so we had to configure 8th differently. The homeless shelter is asking us to balance off different legitimate needs against each other. I'm
Point of order, Chair. Could
question
we
of
call the
Jermaine.
vote? And we're talking about all kinds of things that are not pertinent to this particular situation.
I'm talking about how this is a situation where I'm reaching a decision based upon what I'm seeing as competing interests, and a flawed situation has to do with the past. And I'm talking about in this situation where there are competing interests, and in this situation where there's a history which led us into a complex situation.
Motion to question the germane.
I believe my comments are indeed germane to this decision.
You believe, but there needs to be a process through Robert's Rules of Order to see if everybody agrees with you. That's how question of germane works.
How does question of germane work? Are we supposed to have a poll on whether or not my comments are germane?
Why don't you rapidly finish them and
Yeah.
then we'll be done.
I think I'd rather just finish my comment.
Okay,
And
go ahead.
I would just like to say that earlier today and today, there has been some impatience by some council members to listen to another council member's full comments. I believe council members should be allowed to not only explain their vote to the public, but maybe explain their vote to other people. Is there any further discussion on this question? All those in favor of approving the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion passes 6-1. Thank you very much. We're going to, is that the end of your committee?
Oh, end of committee. Yay.
Thank you very much. End of
It
the Public
started
Works
early and
Committee.
it went late.
The next committee to report is the Lake Whatcom Reservoir and Natural Resources Committee.
Thank you. We had one item before us this afternoon. This was an update on the Middle Fork Dam Fish Project, Passage Project. $4 million grant from the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation to American Rivers will accelerate one of the highest priority river and salmon restorations in Washington State. The grant will contribute to the removal of the Middle Fork Diversion Dam on the Middle Fork Nooksack River, revitalizing salmon and steelhead runs while maintaining water supply for the city of Bellingham. Project costs will be paid for by the Water Fund and then reimbursed from the American Rivers Foundation. This was for information only, and end of committee report.
Thank you very much, Dan. The next committee to give a report is Community and Economic Development, and that committee is chaired by Pinky Vargas.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had two items in front of us today. The first one was a presentation by Sustainable Connections, who provided a report on their 2016 accomplishments and 2017 activities. We had a presentation by Executive Director Derek Long. We have a fiscal impact of $30,000 a year that we help support certain programs. The main ones are the Think Local, Buy Local, and the Eat Local First programs. These work a lot with our local agricultures, with our restaurants, with our grocers, and some of the reports back that they said is that in their surveys, 84% of people feel they are motivated to buy local, and this helps in regards to local buying and also local agriculture. So these programs are very much working for us in the community. If anybody wants a little bit more information, I encourage them to look at this afternoon's presentation. We thank them for their work in the area and also supporting the Bellingham Energy Prize, which they were very instrumental in getting through with us. So thank you for them. The second one was a resolution authorizing the amendment of the 2016 HUD Annual Action Plan, allocating federal funds from HUD for low and moderate income residences of Bellingham. This guides the allocation of federal community development block grants, sometimes called CDBG, and home investment partnership program funds. Now, I'm not going to get into all the details of exactly what all the funds that were moved around, etc. You can take a look at that online or in this afternoon's presentation, but I will tell you that the committee unanimously recommended approval, and I so move.
Second. We have a motion before us. I'm sorry, I went on to the next item already. This is to amend the 2016 HUD Action Plan. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. I believe that's end of committee.
And a committee.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair.
It's okay. It is a long evening, and we're just starting now. Into Committee of the Whole, we had several action items. The first one was a resolution authorizing a second PEG channel, that's Public Education and Government channel, for the purpose of transmitting Bellingham TV, that is BTV, in both standard definition and high definition to Comcast subscribers. As we heard this afternoon, an increasing number, now over half of subscribers, get their cable television in high definition. This would allow us to have two stations broadcasting, one in high definition and one in standard definition. This needed a resolution. This afternoon, the Council recommended approval, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion before us. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor of the resolution authorizing a second high-definition channel signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. That passes unanimously. We then had an information-only item, an update to the city-owns fiber network. There's been discussion about the role of high-speed fiber, both in economic development and city operations. This presentation solely focused on the city's existing fiber network and what we have in place and its history. It was for information only. The third item was a review of the Public Works Director's decision, and that decision denied the request for retail water service and sewer water service at 1323 Mount Baker Highway. This afternoon, there was a motion to recommend postponing this decision after some discussion until the Mayor's office reviews the code to see if there's any opportunity for policy changes to the municipal code to be equitable, including an annexation review. Basically, I think that a number of City Council members expressed a desire to be able to approve this request for sewer service, but it simply just did not seem to meet our code. We felt that the Planning Public Works Director appropriately denied the proposal, but we weren't prepared to affirm or that decision on review. So it was postponed until we get a, excuse me, is there a question? I'm on item number 3, review of Public Works Director's denying request for retail service. Okay, so we postponed that decision until we hear back from the staff on possible policy changes and or ordinance changes so that we can re-review that decision for denial. So at this point, the decision for denial is neither approved nor overturned. It's simply being postponed. Okay. The fourth item was a work session on to revise Bellingham Municipal Code to make low-impact development the preferred and commonly used approach to site development as required under the city's NPDES municipal stormwater permit. We'd already actually approved this for one reading. There were some changes made since then. This was for information and discussion only. No changes were made, and this item will come up for final approval later on in the same meeting under third and final. The next one was a public opinion survey of Bellingham residents. It was a presentation for information only, but it was really very interesting. I'd like to summarize a few of the things on there if I can find the page. The full report has just been posted to the city's website, but there was a brief discussion of it. There were several key findings. One of the key findings is that in general, people of Bellingham feel that, actually 94% feel that Bellingham is a high or very good quality of life. They were overall pleased with it. However, there were some issues that are identified as key concerns of the public despite that fact. One of those is a focus on homelessness and housing and affordability, which can be related to each other. There's a concern that the homeless problem is actually creating quality of life concerns for other people, as well as, of course, troubling the people who are themselves homeless. I think I'll let everyone look at that summary and direct them to the website if they want to see the full detail. One of the things we were told is that despite it being a long report, people stuck out to the end. We had an enormously high response rate. They gave a number of comments, very rich in content, and that'll be looked over by our staff. The next was an overview of a letter of intent between the City of Bellingham and the Lighthouse Ministries. This was for information only. This letter of intent outlines the current working assumptions between the the city administration led by the mayor and the Lighthouse Ministries. The staff and the Lighthouse Ministries executive director provided an overview of an update of a preliminary agreement to partner to serve the vulnerable high-risk homeless individuals with a new easy access shelter. The agreement will eventually include a lease of the land to the ministries, the sale of existing structures to the ministries, and a contract for service once the facility is open. All three of those have yet to be approved, but the memorandum outlines what those elements would be. No action was taken. That was for information only. The next item was somewhat related because it had to do with the property we're talking about. It was a proposed lease of city property at 801 to 807 Roeder Avenue. This is not a lease to the new tenants, but actually it's a lease to the existing tenants, with that lease now being overseen directly by the city. Formerly was overseen by the port. So staff was seeking authorization under summary procedures under Bellingham Municipal Code 488-040 to lease the city property to the existing tenants. The staff's proposing a 14-month leases commencing April 1st, that is next month. The proposed rate for all 5 units is a combined $592 per month, which is basically what the city is currently getting as pass-through funds for these property. The proposed rate is consistent with what the city received from the property in 2016. The proposed rate reflects the short duration of the lease and the need for continued access by the city and Lighthouse Mission, who are considering developing the property as a homeless shelter. In other words, as we're investigating that property for a shelter, we will be on site. That's an encumbrance to the current tenants, and so that was seen as appropriate for a reduced rent.
Michael?
Yes.
Just to clarify, the lease, it was Colony Wharf, not the port. You just said that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to, in case.
It was through the port, but port delegated it to Colony
To the
Wharf,
Colony
and
Wharf.
Colony Wharf managed it.
So,
Okay.
Yeah. I don't,
Okay, so there's several layers of
Yes.
administration, and now the city's taking on the administration directly. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, this afternoon, the committee recommended approval of these leases, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the leases for the existing tenants on the property 801 and 807 Roeder Avenue. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That passes unanimously. The next item is authorization to negotiate a lease of city property, the same property, at 801, 807 Roeder Avenue to the Lighthouse Mission Ministries. The staff is seeking authorization under the regular procedures of BMC 4.88050 to negotiate a below-market lease for city property at 801, 807 Roeder to the Lighthouse Mission Ministries. The purpose of the below-market rate lease is due to the public benefit that a potential easy access shelter would provide to the community. The proposed lease would not commence until the leases with the current tenants expire, which was slated now to be the end of May of 2018. Staff was seeking direction on this afternoon. I believe we had a motion on this one or not? Did we?
No.
Yeah, this one we did not finish discussing the matter this afternoon, and we said we'd resume discussion this evening. Gene.
You know, as Terry had this morning a problem with the first item we had, I have a problem with this one, and for one reason only. I cannot bring myself to vote for something that may not come to fruition until we know where the port's coming from, until we have an official word from the port on whether they're going to relinquish their right of first refusal or battle us in court. So I have a hard time voting to send the staff into negotiations on a piece of property we may or may not end up with. Usually when we send staff out to negotiate leases, it's pretty much to negotiate lease, bring it back, we vote on it, and then boom, we go from there. So I just want to say that out front. I wouldn't be, I don't know why we just can't postpone this until the port meeting next Thursday, or next week from tomorrow. If they don't take it up or they don't show any interest, then we could come back and go from there. But I just feel that it not only for me, it might be sending a message out into the community, of which has just started the discussion now, because this didn't hit, once this hit the newspapers, it hadn't hit our agenda till today. This is the first time it's hit our agenda. First time. Now, people have listened to the mayor on the radio, and people have read the newspaper article, and I'm sure all of you have taken a lot of questions, just as I have. But I just think voting to go send the staff out and negotiate a lease now is just not I just can't bring myself to do it until we know exactly where we're at on that. We may end up with the buildings. We may not end up with the buildings. And it is hard for me to believe, through all the years of sitting up here, that there is going to be a battle no matter where we put this. I fully understand that, and I accept that challenge. Because I accepted that challenge with the Washington Grocery Building when Catholic Community Services put in a bid. I accepted that challenge with Kateri Court. I accepted that challenge with Francis Place. I went to battle with everybody who didn't want that there. And I just feel that we need to be careful so we don't send out mixed signals that we're already negotiating a lease. And I understand legally why the legal department and the administration is seeking that, but I just can't bring myself to putting my stamp on a lease that there's a whole lot of unanswered questions. I mean, right off the bat, and thank God for the Lighthouse Mission. I don't know where we'd be without them, but they have to, in the newspaper article, they have to raise $1.5 million. That's a lot of money. And we're going to be spending money that I have no problem spending at all. So I just feel I just can't support this part of it at this time, and look forward to see what comes out of the Port Commission's next meeting to see exactly what they're going to do. I read the adamant statement by Bobby Briscoe that said he would never vote to relinquish that. I don't know where the other ones are at. I watched the Port meeting on the computer, and there was some ambiguity, but I just think, you know, we have a lot of partners in this waterfront, a lot of partners, and I just want to make sure we're doing everything we should and not send out mixed signals until the time is right to do that. So that's the only reason I won't support this.
Dan?
My understanding is that this, if this motion were to pass, then this would provide the staff the opportunity to be poised to enter into those negotiations. So it's not a final decision by any means, and it would provide staff to be ready to, depending on the Ports Commission's decision next week, that they would be ready to then enter into negotiations if that were to be a possibility. So I'm going to move to authorize the staff to enter into negotiations with the Lighthouse Mission for a below-market lease of city property located at 801 and 807 Roeder Avenue for use as an easy-access shelter, and staff shall report back to the council for future direction.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to authorize the administration to begin negotiations on this lease. Terry?
I've got a question for you, Dan, with this, because before you read the motion, you stated that this would allow staff to gear up to enter negotiations if it goes through. But your motion was to authorize staff not to gear up, but authorize staff to enter into negotiations, that means allow them to enter in negotiations now, not to get ready to enter in. And there's a big difference with that. So is your motion to enter in, to authorize them to enter into negotiations? Because, you know, that's different than what you started to say.
Right. So when I asked Mr. Raffato from our legal department to amend that motion or to clarify that in any way.
Well, Peter Raffato, City Attorney. So, I mean, the thing to keep in mind is our code has certain pathways for leasing property. And this is under a code provision that lays out different ways that we can ultimately enter into a lease. And this is authorizing a specific pathway, which is a direct negotiation. So keep in mind the code, I don't have it in front of me, but you know, you can do requests for proposals, you can do other things. This is, in a sense, satisfying that code provision that says this is the manner in which we're going to identify someone that we'll be leasing property to. That's really what this step in the council process is doing. So that is in essence what you're doing, and I think that the recommended motion captures that.
Gene? Not to belabor the point, we're all getting tired up here. This has been a long day, but you know, you're sending out a signal, and I know why we're doing this. I understand that, but you're also sending out a signal that says we're already negotiating a lease. Now, I'm just thinking about what this does to everybody in the community, because we have to think about everybody in the community. I'm not going to take a back seat to anybody about working with the Homeless Coalition, because I've been doing it for a long time. That's not the point. The point is we also have to be careful when we send out a message. When there was 100 and some people at the port meeting, my Port Marina advisory meeting turned into a meeting about this shelter, and it wasn't even on the agenda. And I spent an hour and a half, almost 2 hours there, trying to explain to them and calming them down and thanking the mayor for bringing something forward, trying to get this done, but just take a little time out, because nothing is final until it's final. So just try to tamp it down a little bit. I just feel going forward with this, saying we're already going to start negotiating for some buildings we may or may not have. That's all I'm trying. I'm not trying to stop the project or anything like that. I'm just thinking we have to be careful.
April?
So Gene's had quite a bit of experience on here, and he's warned me a couple times of having a pretty good pulse on the community, and I said, no, it'll be fine, and then I did my thing, and I suffered for it. So I think what I'm hearing you say, Gene, is that you're very supportive. We want to move forward with this. I think what I'm hearing you say is you're wanting the community, us to hear back a little bit more before we set forth.
Well, not only that, but I want to hear from our partners in this, and that's the port.
And I guess what I'm asking staff, if we were to vote on this in 2 weeks, is it putting you way behind? Is it changing anything if we were to postpone and accommodate what Gene is asking for? What's the...
Well,
I
mean, practically, whenever you say to do this, we're going to do it. And the only concern I have is, and starting to talk to the Lighthouse Mission about how to do this is not doing it. I mean, as everybody said, there's a lot of other things we need to do. They need to raise the money. Even if we negotiated a lease with them and they couldn't raise the funding to do their part, which is most of it, this wouldn't happen. If the port would come up with another location that would meet the criteria, but it makes me a little uneasy if I'm not convinced that you guys are committed to doing this, absent finding another site that is appropriate and meets the criteria. That makes me a little nervous.
I'm going to take a turn, and Terry.
Yeah.
I think the public discussion is just starting, and what I'm hearing Gene say is he would like to leave space for the public discussion to kind of grow and, I don't know, not get out of sequence. And what I'm trying to figure out is is this a nice next incremental step, or will people see this as prejudging? And I guess what you're saying is people will think this is prejudging. I think the administration understands that there are several layers of approval between here and there, but I think I'm sensitive to this. I'm having a hard time figuring out if there's going to be any place else to put this, and so I don't know if we should bite the bullet now or not. Terry?
That's fine.
Yeah, I really understand what Gene's saying on this one. I'd feel much more comfortable if we were to wait at least till the next port meeting, because you said what Mr. Briscoe has said, and then I've talked with Michael McCauley, and he said he hopes to be able, that he's looking at the port buying it, but they would probably have a better idea at their next meeting. And I would feel much better with us making decisions based on having a little more information with that. And I do agree, things are just starting. I'm fully committed for us to do this. And I think I haven't heard anyone talking against doing a low barrier shelter. You know, it is sometimes the location, but right now, since we fought a long time to get back on a good place with the port, I'd like to honor a little bit for the week. So I would like to move that we postpone the decision on this till our next meeting.
Second.
We now have a motion to postpone the main motion. The main motion was to authorize negotiation. The motion postponed supersedes that. Is there any discussion of the motion to postpone? Pinky?
So I was pretty comfortable earlier in maybe moving forward because I understand that it's just a process of negotiation and moving forward. But I completely get what Jean is saying. And we know we've been working on this for 18 months. We know we've looked at multiple properties, that people won't talk to us, that they won't consider it, that this is almost impossible to solve. And for us to have a solution in front of us, for me, is positive and heartwarming to finding solutions for homelessness. However, this perception thing that Jean has talked about here, I've certainly felt that when when I think that people know what's going on and I find out that they don't. And I am concerned that we are going to be fighting a perception battle. And I am willing to wait 2 weeks to hear what they have to say. But I do want to say that earlier today someone said, one of our public speakers said, this is not an ideal situation. No, it's not. But we don't have any situations that are ideal. We don't have any options. We're running out of options and we have hundreds of people spending the night on the street. We need to solve this. But if we ask for 2 weeks from the public to have opportunity to have this discussion, I am comfortable with that. But at that time, I do want to move forward and at least investigate our options because we don't have very many and we have a desperate situation to solve.
April?
My original question was how is this for staff? I think everybody's trying to clearly, what I'm hearing everybody say is we want to pass this, but we also want to bring the community along with us. So, I heard what you said, Mayor, but I don't think that's what I'm hearing us say, that now we're suddenly giving you pause. So I guess, where are we at with staff? Like, is this urgent that we start this process right now? Because there's a lot of wheels to turn and work to do, or is 2 weeks?
Council's prerogative if they wish to consider this for 2 more weeks, and we certainly will proceed. From the staff position, time is of the essence. I share the mayor's concern. Going back to another process of looking again at what we've looked at for the last 18 months will assure 100% assurance we won't have something up next winter or the following winter. You're going to lose years. So I am saying you're rapidly approaching a time where action is required or we not be able to meet the objective. And I will also say that there is no shortage of people who will advocate solutions. To be fair, your staff have really worked their way through every one of those and come to the conclusion that this is the best alignment we can find that meets our parameters that can get up in the shortest period of time. That being said, if council needs 2 weeks so this can gel and find out the outcome, certainly we'll work with that.
Go ahead.
So just, Jean, this is going to bite me, and I know it will every time I listen to you, but I think my heart and my head are just both saying that we just have to send a strong message that this is, granted, we need the community to come along, but we've gotten this far and we need to continue to move forward. I think there's a lot of caveats in that. Hopefully people will listen to this. Hopefully those advocates that are out there can help us get the message out that we're not trying to shove this down anybody's throat. We're not trying to lose working wage jobs or ruin the waterfront. We're simply trying to move forward with what the community has told us. So in that, I think staff needs to know that we're on board as a council, that we're not wavering. And this is one of those times where I think we have to show a really strong backbone, and it's going to be tough. And we're probably going to sit here for hours and hours at our next couple of meetings. But with that, I won't be supporting the postponement, but I would be supporting Dan's motion.
Roxanne?
My simple thought is that homeless people need services now. They needed services when we had a small homeless population. They need services, especially now that we have a growing population. And I'm just not comfortable with waiting for 2 weeks to get services to one of our most vulnerable populations that really needs our support. So I won't be supporting the postponement.
The leases we passed before leave those businesses in that building till May of 2018, correct? Yes. And if the port, let me give you this, Mayor, if the port does not show any interest in discussing this anymore, or even giving us an opinion, or wavering on their part, because I like to take people at their word. You know, Rob Fix told me they do everything they can to try to find something. Well, if they don't, I'm going to be the biggest champion to move forward. I just want to hear from them. And if they say nothing next meeting, then bring it back. I'll give you that much, because that's all I'm saying here, is that we not only give the citizens, but we give the port, our partners, a chance to weigh in. They haven't, I don't think they've done anything publicly. They didn't take a vote or anything like that. I just want to hear what they have to say, and we'll go from there.
Pinky?
That's it.
I feel like I'm in a washing machine right now. I'm really confused. You're right. We need to stand strong, and we need to show a backbone. And I feel like I'm going, ooh, and I want to do something, and I want to do something now. And I'm really struggling with this. I also feel as though that if we give people an opportunity maybe to for the port to tell us what they're going to do, it might be easier for us to stand strong. And I want to be very clear, I am 100% in support of finding a low barrier shelter as soon as possible. And Mayor, you have my full support. I hope you don't think that in any way. This is #1 priority on our surveys and everything we hear every single day. I believe in this. But I also believe that when the public is involved and we've got another entity, we've got a port, etc., I'm going to veer to, I'm going to keep my backbone, but I'm going to ask for those 2 weeks. So.
I'm going to take a turn then, Terry. Yeah. So here's the way I'm looking at it. I would like to take the course of the highest likelihood of success. And as much as I don't think there's going to be better property out there, there might be. I doubt it. But 2 more weeks to let people look, to come up with ideas. I've heard some that just, no, they're not going to work. They may think they may work, but they're not going to work. 2 more weeks for the port to understand how serious we are, how limited a range of options are, that we're in dead earnest on this. I don't know if it'll change the port's mind, but maybe it'll give us clarity. Maybe it'll give a chance for a greater discussion. We need to talk about the locations for the displaced businesses, if we do go ahead. There's a giant empty warehouse, not too far away, but maybe it's not a great location for these displaced businesses. It's on the waterfront technically, but maybe it's not good enough. There are some questions I think are mostly answered. To have high likelihood of success of having a shelter in the end, I'm willing to wait the 2 weeks. That's where, even though I was set to go ahead. Terry.
I'll make mine kind of brief. It is just about waiting till that next meeting. Earlier in the day, Tara Sundin had said, until the port relinquishes their rights to purchase, we can't move forward with a lease. And if we give the port that extra time, staff extra time to talk with the port, and we can move forward together on this, I think we're all going to be stronger. Sometimes just rushing straight forward into the breach is not always the best strategy when we're mounting, a campaign that we want the city behind us, we want the port with us, we want our partners. If we can wait 2 weeks to try to get some decision, we could be a whole lot stronger on this one and not in opposition. That's all I'm saying. So.
Any further discussion? The motion right now is to postpone a decision for 2 weeks, as I understand it, until the next meeting. All those in favor of the motion to postpone this decision until our next scheduled meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
I registered as passing 4-3. Is that correct? Opposed, opposed, opposed? Okay. I would just like to say, I in no way should anyone interpret this as a rebuke of the mayor's proposal for coming forward. She was doing exactly what the community asked her to do, exactly what our council priority has been, exactly what the our public survey showed the public priority. The mayor's brought forward the best proposal we've ever seen. I would just like to, whatever proposal we go forward with, this one, another one, to fully succeed. So thank you, Kelly, for bringing it forward. You did a very good job in a very difficult situation, and I appreciate that. Anything else on this? Okay, the last item on our agenda was a presentation of a work program from our Development Services Division. This afternoon we ran out of time. That item was postponed to another meeting, so no action was taken on any way on that matter, and there's nothing to report. Our next item is approval of City Council meeting minutes. We have one set of meeting minutes from the 13th.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 13th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Those pass unanimously. Old and new business. We're all pretty tired, huh? There were several items in new business this afternoon. One I didn't do. I would just like to report out that the City Council did have, I think, a very successful annual retreat. That annual retreat was not videotaped, however, it was audio taped. The audio tape is now digital, and if anyone requests it, they can get that audio tape. There were several members of the public there as well. If you actually, one's in the audience right now, you might want to check with them. We discussed both long-term budget and government service levels. We discussed council meeting procedures and committee procedures and council communication efforts. That's my summary of our retreat. Next, I will go on to report on our executive session. This afternoon, we originally had 2 items scheduled. We added a third. The 2 scheduled items were a potential property acquisition. In this one, staff provided information on a potential property acquisition, for information only, and no action was taken. For the second one, staff provided information on a property acquisition of a 1-acre parcel owned by the Revocable Living Trust of Molly Monahan, located on Wildwood Avenue, and a city-owned stormwater detention facility on a city-owned stormwater detention facility in the Samish neighborhood. The property has an assessed value of $72,750, and the city will use the property for a public trail. I would now entertain from a motion to authorize the purchase of this 1-acre parcel for $68,264.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the property acquisition for a total of $68,264. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. The last item under executive session was potential litigation. The staff provided information on a litigation matter. It was for information only and discussion only. No action was taken. Mayor's report.
2 appointments, or an appointment and a reappointment. I need your approval to appoint Iris Mount Gibson to the Planning and Development Commission.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve Iris Mount Gibson to the Planning Commission. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Iris is approved, or appointed.
Thank you. And then finally, a reappointment of Jeremy Ferreira to the Bellingham Sister Cities Board, and you don't need to take any action on that.
Thank you very much. Next item is consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second, please.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Last item is final consideration of ordinances. We have 1 ordinance to consider.
Agenda Bill 21518, An ordinance of the City of Bellingham, Washington, amending multiple sections of the city's municipal code in order to incorporate and require low-impact development principles and best management practices as required by the city's 2013-2018 National Pollution Discharge Elimination System municipal stormwater permit.
Move third and final.
Second.
Roll call.
Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Dan Hamel.
Aye.
Gene Knutson.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
April Barker.
Right.
Ordinance passes 7-0.
Is there any further business for the city council? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.